What's up, guys? Chris here, and I did something odd last night. I was waiting for this morning's video to export, and I decided I had talked about possibly creating a fresh character in Final Fantasy XIV, and there were a couple of reasons for it, and what server it'll be on, and all that. And it doesn't really matter. I'm trying something here, so I'm not trying to reveal where it is or what I'm doing with it, but I really just wanted to try being a new player. Imagine that a friend talked you into playing this game and said, play it, and then wasn't there to guide you. They gave you some advice at work or at school or in passing, and then they said, here's what you need to follow. They gave you the generic advice that we would give you on stream, that a friend who's played for a while that would give you, that you might glean from a guide, but you didn't really retain all of it. You've never played it before. Maybe you have a little MMO experience. Maybe it's just RPG experience, but you don't necessarily know 14. And what would that look like? So the rules I set for myself is no food buff, no experience earrings, no doing Hall of the Novice. I'm not doing side quests because we tell people MSQ is enough unless it forces me to. I'm just leveling. I'm just playing through the MSQ. I'm not doing my hunting log because I wouldn't know about that. I'm not doing my challenge log. It tries presenting it, but it bombards you with all these different tool tips, and there's just so much to take in, and the odds that you grasp even 30% of it, it can just be a lot. And it's content that was the best of UI and the best of quest design nearly a decade ago. So we've come a long way in games, and it's just a question of does it hold up. So in 5.3 of Final Fantasy XIV this year, they went back, and for the first big real time, they made an effort to change the way a new player gets to do. And there was two big changes. First of all, they trimmed like 100 quests from ARR. I haven't done ARR since ARR, so I don't really know what that feels like, and I have to constantly base it on brief little interactions with those of you in the community who have been through it since that change or leading up to that change, and comparing, what a group of people did just prior to the change and post change. But those two sets of people may not have had the same expectations going in. They may not have come from the same background. So to say this one liked things this much and this one liked things this much, so one form of the content is better, it's really hard to gauge. And so I really wanted to get a feel for what a new player experiences today. And we'll get to what I'm comparing it to in a minute. And the other thing is Shadowbringers was the first time in an MMORPG that I have cared about story. I have played World of Warcraft, every expansion except Warlords of Draenor. I have played Final Fantasy, every expansion since ARR, which is all of modern Final Fantasy XIV. I played Guild Wars 1. I played ESO at launch. I've played EVE Online. And whether or not those games had a narrative element, some have more than others, I have treated them all roughly the same. I've tried a couple of others. I've tried some free-to-plays and stuff, but those are the ones that like I've really put, lots of... Destiny 1, I put a lot of time into. Destiny 2, I've been playing. It's a list, but regardless of how much narrative they have, I've gone at them basically as the same person looking for the same thing every time. And what they do well versus what they don't might determine how my time breaks down, but I've gone at them looking for the same content every time, and that's gameplay first. Gameplay, gameplay, gameplay. After the core gameplay loop, I want there to be a social aspect. I love sharing these games. If I didn't want a game that I would share, I would go play in my own world where nobody else can mess with me. And I have games like that I enjoy playing like that. MMOs are not that thing for me. Now, with that aside, I then allow the narrative to fill it in as they layer it on. Some games it's talk while you play, some games it's in quest text, some games it's more opaque, some games it's more obvious, some games it's really forced and there's not any options. Other games you get some choices and you feel like there's a little bit of agency. In an MMO, odds are they're not, because we all have to get roughly to the same play state so that we can go into the next raid or dungeon or whatever group content together from the same point of view. We can't be on opposing sides unless it's a faction-based game, in which case we're always on opposing sides or always all together. I don't get to choose. I'm against this faction right now, but my friend on my faction is not. We only get so much choice, and that experience has made it always feel a little bit less than what like a single player experience can do, where I can truly break something. I can truly go off my own path. And so I haven't expected much of them, and as a result, I haven't gotten much of them. And they don't disappoint me because I don't put time in and I don't want anything out. And that means that it doesn't matter if a game has a good narrative or bad narrative for me, because it's not what I was looking for. But with Shadowbringers, it's a game that's meant an immense amount to me on its own, socially and personally. It's been a lot of my life. And because of this community here on YouTube and now on Twitch as well, it's come to mean a great deal more in ways beyond what I look for a game, because now I have an active interest in the things that the people in the community care about. And when I go to FanFest, I want to not just understand the panels that I care about, I want to understand all of them. I want to take part in all of it. And I want to put different pairs of shoes on and see from different viewpoints why people feel the way they do. And Yoshi P said prior to Shadowbringers, I don't remember which interview or which announcement or what, that his plan for this expansion was for it to be able to stand alone. And he didn't say like alone like it's its own island. Alone in that if you up to this point are a returning player, it's been too long, you don't remember the narrative, or if you're a player who's skipped cutscenes up to this point, which I'm sure internally they have statistics on, you don't need to fear that you've been left out. I would love for you to feel like you can watch the first cutscenes and then make your choice about whether or not you want to engage with the Shadowbringers story. And so, out of respect for that series of statements, which I assume it's like when a parent tries to tell a kid 20 million life lessons and then the kid grasps onto this one offhand statement. He may not even remember that he said it, but there was some statement and it just struck me as, this is my chance. This is my time. We're not picking up where another story left off. This is going to be a freshly formed thought in a new world, per se, where there are going to be characters that this is the first time. And if they come over, they're going to be meeting people who won't have known them. So they're going to have to introduce themselves. And it's going to be my chance to catch up. Now, having done so much 14, you naturally start to grasp who quest givers are, who different raid bosses are, because you've interacted with their names a lot. So like, I knew what the Scions are, I know what a Primal is, I have an idea of what an Ascian is, and then around those, anytime I've had a question, I'm surrounded by people like Brian that have a deep love for Final Fantasy. I'm surrounded by you guys. I watch a ton of content from people like Ethis Asher that can answer all of this stuff for me. And so, you know, the Reddit community. And so, for those of you that are into the lore, there's always somewhere that those of us that aren't can get our simple one-off questions, but we don't know what we don't know. So we don't ask you guys everything. And so those of us that don't care about story end up missing a lot. And in this community that's very passionate about its story, sometimes it's very hard to come out and say, I want to reveal how little I know about story, because this community has a history of having a handful of people treat that group as if, well, then you don't deserve to be here. You don't play this game for story. You don't deserve to be here. And I've expressed my thoughts on that over and over. And so Shadowbringers was my fresh start. Shadowbringers was that moment that I could join in. And I did, and I loved it. And I was immediately attached to it. And I found myself watching and reading all of the side quests in the final zone, and I found myself looking forward to the next patch, and I found myself getting mad at characters for their choices and feeling awful when certain events occurred and feeling like I wanted to rejoice with them when other events occurred, and really looking at the outcome. Even if the outcome was relatively predictable from a narrative standpoint, I still cared, and I cared the same way I do about a TV show that I watch or a movie I watch, which is typically where I go get my visual narrative, is I go consume it in a piece of content that's only that, and I let games be games, and TV and movies kind of handle the rest. And this really meant a lot, and this expansion has taken on a different tone for me as a result, where actually it doesn't require the gameplay to be good, and what has allowed me to love Shadowbringers so much is that statement aside, even without story, the gameplay in this expansion is good. These most recent Eden fights are good fights. Doesn't matter if you don't know who they are. Doesn't matter if you don't watch the cutscenes leading up to them. They're good fights on their own. They do stand on their own. They just happen to also come with a good story. So, they complement each other. They both make each other deeper. A purely narrative experience with crappy gameplay, the crappy gameplay doesn't add anything. A crappy narrative layered on top of good gameplay, it doesn't add anything. It's fluff, it's filler. These both complement each other, and when paired with each other, you can appreciate narrative more deeply in a different way. But that's not to say, right? You don't know what you don't know. So that's not to say that if somebody says this is the best expansion of their life and they didn't care about story at all, that can't be true. To say that hasn't moved them in some other way, that they haven't had an interaction. So, like, I say all of that knowing only what it's meant to me, and that interacting with this expansion in a different way than me, whether that be deeper or less deep, it doesn't matter. It is what it means to you. And so what I then realized is I want to go back and know more. I want to go back and understand what led to this point. And so I went back and started an ARR character. And I've watched every cutscene so far, and I can tell you the opening cutscenes, I'm immediately reminded of why I skipped them the first time. They're slow. They're very slow. There's pauses between talking. There's very little voice acting. There's honestly not that much music. It's the same music on loop. It talks in riddles and it talks in hints. And if you don't come with a hunger of your own, it's easy to dismiss. If there's something that you want from the game, then it's tempting you and it's baiting you and it's making you hunger for the answer and the next thing. So I see why people latched on, but I see why if you didn't get that initial hook in the first 10 or 15 levels, that once you skipped a little bit of it, once you skipped the first time they show you a glimpse of an Ascian because they dismiss it without showing its significance, and it's meant to be this glimpse. When you get off a boat, I started in Limsa, when you get off a boat in Limsa and they show Alphino in passing and you don't know who that is, and you could assume that it is just another backdrop because unlike a book where every single word on the page is placed there by the author for a reason, in a game, you can't just not have things in the background. So there are trees and there are people and there are benches and there are buildings that don't mean anything. They are just filler, and the important things are among them. And so because it doesn't isolate what those important things are, it would be easy to miss. And so I am aware now why I skipped it, and I stand by why I skipped it. I don't think that version of me was any different than how I would feel had I not met and been around you guys for the last 3 years. Had I not spent this time on YouTube, where you guys have made me want to try looking at it from a different angle, I would still go back, start as a fresh player today, and skip the story. I would do it exactly the same. But now that I care about Shadowbringers, now that I care about this expansion that we're in, it's really great. I think this is kind of like the Star Wars movies, where there's probably a nice debate somewhere on what the best order to play these expansions is, based on solely me being a little bit in the way of ARR and having played Shadowbringers to completion here. 5.3 wraps it up. 5.4 has come out, but that's the beginning of really the story for the next expansion. So that's our transition. And so I like it. It's already answering questions for me because I know how things turn out. You know, the first time I meet Y'shtola, that means something to me. The first time that being in the Limsa area, coming out of the 5.4 patch, where without kind of talking about spoilers there, because that's relatively new content, you're interacting with factions and with people that are still around in the game, in Impact. And you're coming across decisions and you're coming across tidbits that are throwaway sentences that have turned into almost whole scenarios later in and have had huge ripples in the narrative experience that we're going into or have gone into over the course of the game. And it's awesome. So as a narrative experience, I'm having an absolute blast playing ARR for the first time after Shadowbringers, going back and playing it solely for narrative. I'm only doing main story quests. I'm doing no side quests. I'm doing no hunting log, no experience gain, just trying it as a new player that was told, stick to the MSQ, I'll see you in a few hundred hours. And I just want to see what happens. I want to know how long it takes. And the reason for that is that World of Warcraft just redid its new player experience. And while Final Fantasy expanded their demo, their free demo, to be by far the most inclusive of any subscription game I have ever seen. They're giving you the first 2 expansions totally for free. Go nuts. There's a handful of restrictions on the way you interact socially in the game because they can't have people creating free accounts and then doing ridiculous behavior, so they have to put some rules in. But as far as playing the narrative, you can experience 0 to 60, which is like 100 or 200 hours depending on how you take it in. And you can experience it totally for free. It is the most content. But compared to WoW, which is a much less content, WoW's content is a lot less buffet and a lot more one exquisite morsel. The WoW leveling experience, going through, now I'm on my 2nd class I've never played, is fantastic. It's like a well-run D&D campaign. The DM knows when to give me an ability that will change things. I can change scenery when I so choose. I have the ability to interact with the game in a way that constantly and consistently delivers moments of fun at regular intervals, an appropriate level of reward, an appropriate level of I've earned it. It feels good. Is it perfect? No. Does it beat 14's new player experience so far? Hands down, from a gameplay standpoint, WoW has done something that shocks me. It legitimately surprises me. And I wanted to go back, and I don't want to leave that statement on its own, because I'm telling you, I haven't yet finished what Final Fantasy considers their free welcoming mat. This is what they feel puts their best foot forward. This is what they feel is the best invitation to the game. And I feel mixed, because as a player going back to use it to complete my experience, to round out my understanding and my joy and my love for this game, I'm having a blast. As a new player experience, as a welcoming tool, I don't feel it keeps up. I don't feel it keeps up with what World of Warcraft has had to offer. Both games, Shadowlands is a ton of fun right now. Shadowbringers is a ton of fun right now. And you see them on stream and you hear about them from people, and they're well reviewed and the critics love them and people are coming from around to download them. And then the games both have a chance to say, you know what, do you want to try it? Click here, download now. And when you do, it's jarring how different they are. So I don't really know what this post is. I just wanted to share these thoughts that I was having with you guys. I haven't quite wrapped my head around how to make it more of a formal thing. Thankfully, that's not what this channel is. So if it is a more formal thing to go somewhere or be better edited or have some actual gameplay shown, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's a bigger project than I know how to take on, and a stronger creator than me can handle it better, that knows both these games. Or comes from one and tries the other. But the new player experience from Final Fantasy is exactly as I remember it, except now I have the knowledge that games get better. ARR was great at the time of ARR. Since then, we've learned to write quests better. We've learned to design zones better. We have better graphics. We have better combat systems. We're better, right? Shadowbringers is better content. Thank goodness. It would be weird if we'd been going downhill. So we have better content today. So it is a little bit of a step back in time. But if I judge it for what it was, it is exactly as I remember. The difference is now I know what to care about. Now I know what characters I have questions about. And when Heidelin interacts with me, I hang on every word. And when I see Y'shtola for the first time, I'm so excited about how deep I know that relationship will get. And to see there, to go back and watch from the looking glass the first time you met somebody that became really important in your life. And in passing, you may have bumped into him in a store and said, oh, hey, and you don't know how important that moment was. And you look back, and that's so awesome to be able to do that. I wish New Game Plus had rewards. I feel that instead I've decided to do this on a new character because, A, I want to know how the experience paces out, and B, there's no way to do that on my existing character. Even with classes I haven't leveled yet, I can't go back and say, okay, well, I'll just do it on them and get a feel for it. No, it doesn't work that way. So I just started a new character. We'll just do it this way. I've created it off in its own little place. Sargatanas was actually locked, so I couldn't have put it on my server if I wanted to, which felt weird. And yeah, I don't know why it's locked for me. Like, if I'm allowed to have a character on there, why can't I have a set of character on there? It's not like I'm going to ever play them at the same time, right? I take up the same amount of space. Maybe it's a market board thing. I don't know. Maybe it's one of those armory chest save. Spaghetti code. So I just wanted to share this with you guys. I just wanted to share kind of the experience I had yesterday. It just kind of caught me off guard. There wasn't a plan for this. It just kind of organically had been kind of toying with it, and I talked about it here and there, and I'd mentioned, oh, it'd be cool if this, and I said, you know what? Forget trying to build out when this would be appropriate and what I would want to get out of it. Let's just press the start button. Let's just push go and just see what happens. And I'm having an absolute blast. I'm reading every line of text. I'm enjoying the cutscenes, and I think by playing it this way, as somebody who's gameplay first, I don't feel I'm missing out, because if a new raid drops and I'm still working through ARR, I just switch back over to my main and do the new raid, right? So like if 5.45 gets here and I want to go into Via Deboja, I can go do that. And then I can come back and I can do this at my own pace. And I think New Game Plus can one day be there. And I really like that this is a chance to, as time allows, enjoy this for whatever open-ended amount of time it takes you. I'm a slow reader. And it probably comes from avoiding it. And I'm enjoying it for what it is. It reminds me that the development problems that 14 has to get to be the game that they want it to be, it would take a lot. It would take a lot to go back and get it all voice acted. It would take a lot to get it all brought up to the current engine. It's an enormous mountain of content that was all done in a way that is just so starkly different than what you can do now. And I don't know how WoW was nimble enough to rebuild what they did, but the new player experience that rolled out with Shadowlands is just, it's made more incredible by contrast to what playing a relatively unupdated new player experience is. The story to 14, I'm not sure whether or not I'll keep this feeling, but my feeling as of this moment is that there just need to be more on-ramps. There just need to be more places that we can invite somebody to come join us and just trust that everything up to that point was good and was important. And if it didn't catch them, that's okay. We'll get them later. And when they come on in Shadowbringers or they come on in 6.0 and they love it, we'll have a system in place to say, okay, now that you're on the road with us, why don't we take you back to some of the sections you missed, because you might enjoy them now that you're here, now that you're loving the story of this game. And if somebody wants to play this game and never gets on one of those on-ramps, doesn't matter if we're in 13.0, 82.0, it doesn't matter. If they never want to get on, the fights are fun, the combat's fun, the zones are beautiful, there's the glamour is neat, the crafting system has its own depth, the beast tribes are their own story that stands alone, it's more bite-sized, the crossover events are amazing. There are so many things that redeem this game that if somebody wants to play without loving story, that's fine. And I'm really excited to see where this game can go if they ever find a better way of saying, okay, we got you on one of these other things, and now let's invite you into story at a later date. We don't only need to invite players in who care about story. We can invite in players of all kinds. And then if they choose to engage in story, we have a very great set of content to share with you. So I just wanted to kind of share that. I don't really have a plan for this video. I don't even know what the subject is. I just know that this is kind of what I went through in the last 24 hours. And it was a surprisingly large amount of emotional journey. It was a surprisingly, it caught me off guard. It just kind of was like, you know what, I'll just do it. I'll just push play. And I pushed play, and now I feel like, wow, I really wish I'd known what kind of rabbit hole I just dived in. So I'm going to keep that character off stream. I'm going to keep that character to myself for now, and continue experiencing it as a totally new, totally isolated player. So if you find me, I don't want help. I don't want Gil. I don't want anything. I just want to see what would happen if I invited somebody to the game and said, just play, I'll see you on the other side, because I feel that's what we do to new players. And I want to know whether or not that's a fair thing to be saying to them, because Brian and I repeat it all the time, and I don't know if I'm actually being fair. So I just want to go test that, and I wanted to share here, because this isn't really a formalized video. It's definitely not a guide or a formal review or comparison because I've got a partial thought to a new thought. And they're just totally on different ends of the spectrum. And they're totally good and bad for different reasons. And I have different questions about them that would finish out how I feel about, you know, narrative in game and new player experiences and all of that. But it is about gaming, kinda. So I just wanted to share with you guys and see if anybody had any relation or just found this to be an interesting experience to try from somebody that's been playing both these games for a very long time and somehow feels like I'm brand new in both of them at the same time. So hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.